Hey, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a video on ableism. Now I have a bunch of videos on my channel to do with ableism, whether it's about a specific incident that's ableist, or I have videos talking about internalized ableism and lateral ableism, and just ableism in general. But I figured I don't have any videos on my channel just going over ableism in general. Now, I have no idea how long this video is going to be. I don't really script my videos, but it may be long. And I may have to divide it into different parts, because I do record on my phone, and now that I have an iPhone, I don't have as much storage as I used to, so my videos can only be about 20 minutes long. But anyway, I'll just get into it. Ableism, there are many definitions of it, but the definition I like to use is discrimination or oppression based on an impairment or a perceived impairment. And now, the social model of disability separates disability and impairment. And impairment is the specific diagnosis or well, I want to use the word disability, but obviously it doesn't work here. But it's an impairment is like, say somebody's blind. Being blind is an impairment, but then the way their impairment interacts with our ableist society is that's what is the actual disability. So I believe that people are disabled by society, but I would also like to acknowledge that certain impairments can be inherently disabling, especially if they cause pain or other issues. But so ableism is an oppression based upon somebody's impairment or perceived impairment, which means you don't necessarily have to be disabled to experience ableism, but I will say ableism affects disabled people more than it affects non-disabled people, because this is a lifelong thing that we have to deal with. Whereas if you don't have a disability but you're perceived to have a disability, that may just be one incident. But the reason I really wanted to make this video is because on TikTok, and of course I've since deleted TikTok from my phone because I don't like it. But somebody commented that people that are disabled do not face the same discrimination as other marginalized groups. They don't have to deal with hate crimes and all of that, which is false. A lot of people think ableism is just using language that's negative towards disabled people, such as cripple or spaz, and yes, that can be an example of ableism, but ableism goes a lot deeper than that. One thing I did really want to say is that ableism interacts with other forms of oppression, such as racism, homophobia, transphobia, fatphobia, anti-Semitism, homophobia, xenophobia, the list goes on. So a lot of times people that are both disabled and have another marginalized identity, these forms of oppression compound and they create even worse outcomes. Like a lot of times Black children with learning disabilities will receive less resources and services in schools, which will just it just makes things worse for people because ableism does compound with other forms of oppression. But one thing I've always believed, and this is something I have read about in grad school, I'll try to find sources, but I've read it, and also it's something I've always kind of felt, is that ableism is one of the roots of other forms of oppression. We see this a lot with homophobia and racism, specifically the way that a few years ago, being gay was in the DSM as a mental illness, and the way enslaved Black people were accused of malingering when they would have different health issues, and also Black people that were fighting for civil rights were characterized as mentally ill for fighting for civil rights. And I believe the reason all of this occurs is because it is easy for us as a society to dehumanize disabled people and see disabled people as victims that we know what they need more than they could possibly know. And when I say we, I mean non-disabled society. So I do believe that it is used to justify other forms of oppression, because if you label somebody as disabled, they automatically have less rights. We see this with what happened with Britney Spears, and even now, people are commenting on her Instagram, on videos of her dancing in her house as well. We need to save her from herself. This woman is doing nothing but dancing. She's not harming anybody, but people are like, oh, you wanted to free Britney, and look at her now. She's a human being, even if she does have some sort of mental or intellectual or psychiatric disability, which I don't know to be the case, but even if she does, that does not justify taking away her rights. And I think that's the problem with arguing, oh, well, I'm gay, I don't have a mental illness. I will say it is problematic to label being gay in and of itself as a mental illness, but I would take it a step further and say, why do we view being mentally ill as the worst thing in the world? And we really need to interrogate our assumptions about disability and mental illness, because that just contributes to more harm against disabled people. So I'm gonna present a content warning, because I am gonna delve a bit into abuse. I'm going to try not to go into details, but disabled people are at a higher risk of domestic abuse and sexual assault than the general population. And I'm not going to go into statistics because I believe statistics kind of like depersonalize something, so people feel almost detached from it. But I'm reading this from the hotline.org, and it is from an article titled Abuse in Disability Communities. So first here it says studies show that people with disabilities are more likely to experience abuse than people without them. Abuse is premised on power and control, and people with disabilities often face specific barriers to accessing help that make them more vulnerable to abuse. The Equal Rights Center offers four key ways that disability intersects with domestic violence. Number one, abuse can cause temporary or permanent disability. Number two, people with disabilities experience higher rates of domestic violence, sexual assault, and abuse. Number three, violence, assault, and abuse against people with disabilities often takes on non-traditional forms. And number four, people with disabilities face additional barriers when seeking help. So here are some ways that abuse can take on non-traditional forms when against people that are disabled. Telling you that you aren't allowed to have a pain flare-up. So that's like if you have chronic pain or any type of condition that may cause chronic pain, if your partner or someone else in your life tells you you're not allowed to have like a bad pain day. Stealing or withholding Social Security disability checks. Now, I know this happens a lot with parents of disabled people. Sometimes they will take their child's disability checks and use it for themselves instead of allowing their adult child to use that check. I know adult child is kind of an oxymoron, but their adult offspring, I guess you would say, that just sounds kind of weird. Telling you that you're a bad parent or can't be a parent because of your disability, invalidating or minimizing a disability with claims that you're faking it. So I've talked about the issues with telling people they're faking disability before on my channel, but most of the time people are not faking disability, and throwing out those accusations causes more harm than good. Using a disability in an effort to shame or humiliate you. Refusing to help you complete necessary life tasks, including using the bathroom or dispensing medication, withholding or threatening to withhold medication, or intentionally giving you incorrect doses by over-medicating or mixing medications in a dangerous or non-prescribed way. I'm not going to read this about the sexual assault because I do believe a lot of times people say that people with intellectual intellectual disabilities are not capable of giving consent, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do realize people with intellectual disabilities are definitely at an increased risk of being age. So I will say that, but I'm not going to read out that part because I don't really want to contribute to something that can also be used to prevent people from intellectual disabilities from expressing their sexuality in whatever way feels right to them. With holding, damaging, or destroying assistive devices. So if anybody remembers from a few years ago, on the Jerry Springer show, there was this whole thing about this woman that took her husband's prosthetic leg, and I see a lot of people use that as a meme and talk about it in a joking way, when really that is an indicator of an unhealthy relationship, and like that's like taking somebody's leg. That's a really fucked up thing to do. And also, a few years ago, I read Nadina Spina's memoir, Such a Pretty Girl, and he had polio as a child, but then later on she had both of her legs amputated, and one time she met this guy and he invited her over, and he locked her in a room and took her prosthetic legs away from her and was like trying to hold her against her will. So that is a very serious situation, and it should not be taken lightly or joked about. Preventing you from seeing a doctor, threatening to out your disability to others if it's non-visible or carries social stigma. We see this a lot with like people that are HIV positive. A lot of times people will threaten to out their HIV status to others, which is not okay to do. Harming or threatening to harm your service animal, or using your disability to justify an abusive partner's behavior. A lot of times, people that are disabled, that are in interabled relationships, meaning a relationship between a non-disabled person and a disabled person, a lot of times they'll be told how lucky they are that this person even wants to be with them. So if they complain that they're being abused or mistreated in any way, people will not believe them, or will be like, oh, well, you're lucky that they would even give you the time of day, which is a big problem. I also want to talk about now how a lot of times when disabled children are unalived by their family members, the media will spin the story in a way to make the people that did the aliving the victims of the story by saying their disabled child was a burden, and of course they were going to snap at some point. The organization Autism Speaks, which many people argue is a hate group, and I also would argue it's a hate group. Years ago they posted a video, like an advertisement, where a mother of an autistic child fantasized about driving her car over a bridge to end the lives of both her and her autistic child, which basically, that advertisement basically said that's an okay thing to do, and it's expected that parents of disabled children would feel that way, which it's not. It's never okay to fantasize about harming a disabled person just because you consider them to be a burden. But there are many reasons why disabled people may be more vulnerable to SA. One of the reasons being they're vulnerable, especially with physical and intellectual disabilities. If you're physically disabled, you may be physically vulnerable, and it may be difficult for you to fight back. If you have an intellectual disability, someone may take advantage of you. And also another reason why we tend to be at higher risk for SA is that people know that when we come forward with our stories, people are probably not going to believe us. And that's really fucked up. And I know this video is definitely gonna get demonetized, but it's a very important video. Other forms of ableism are the higher rates of unemployment among people with disabilities because we are seen as unemployable. I made a video on my experience with discrimination while trying to enter the workforce, and it is still a work in progress. Although I do have a job right now, I do not get paid a lot by any means, so yeah, but I am an intern, so that's kind of expected. But other examples are that disabled people cannot get married without losing the benefits that allow us to live our lives. So this includes if somebody needs a personal care attendant and they're on Medicaid, and if they get married and then their income goes above a certain amount, then they will no longer be able to have that personal care attendant, and their partner will be expected to care for them, even though that's not necessarily a great idea. One second, my mom's coming in, so my dogs are gonna go wild. One thing that I forgot to mention is that many people with Down syndrome and other disabilities are refused organ transplants because of their disability and because they are not as valued as other people. So that was also an example of ableism that I feel like is definitely not talked about enough, because that needs to change. Another example is a lot of true crime cases where disabled people are specifically targeted. I listened to a podcast. It was a few years ago now. I'm looking it up to get the name right. I think it was something like What Happened to Holly or something, but I'm looking it up to make sure that I am not wrong about this, because I don't want to be wrong. But anyway, I will link the podcast down below, but the podcast came out in 2019, and it is called What Happened to Holly Bartlett. And Holly Bartlett was a blind woman living in Canada, and one night her body was found in a ditch, but it was ruled an accident, even though her family and friends insist that she knew the area she was walking in and there was no way that would have happened, but it was ruled an accident because she was blind, so the authorities just assumed that she didn't know what she was doing, when really the taxi driver that drove her home that night was very suspicious. And I'm not saying he did anything because I don't have evidence, but that needs to be looked into. And a lot of times when disabled people do face violence and stuff like that, it's not investigated because people are just like, well, she's disabled, so maybe she just fell over, even if there's evidence that would suggest otherwise. And that's a big problem, is not believing disabled people, and even after disabled people are gone, not looking into their cases as they would a non-disabled person. So there are so many more examples of ableism I could talk about. This isn't an academic video because there's tons of research papers you could read on ableism, but they tend to be inaccessible to the masses. So I wanted to make something that was easy to digest for people and easy to understand, and that they could share with other people. Ableism is more than just calling someone the R word or calling someone a cripple. It can cause people to die, and while it doesn't always, and I do believe we should take slurs seriously too, because I believe they contribute to a society that devalues disabled people. And the words we use do say a lot about what we think of certain groups of people, and I believe us using ableist slurs is indicative that we as a society are ableist, and we do not take disabled people seriously, and we do not see them as human beings, which is a big issue. And there's so much more I could say on this topic, but this is gonna be part 1 because I definitely cannot record more without my phone running out of storage. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. If you learned something, please give this video a big thumbs up. And again, thank you so much for watching. Bye.